There's a person somewhere right now who can feel your phone before you hand it to them. Not the weight of it, not the warmth, the electromagnetic field coming off it, a faint, low-frequency electrical pressure that registers in their skin as something between a tingle and an itch. And it's been happening their whole life, in every room with live wiring, near every running appliance, around every transformer on every utility pole they've ever walked past. Most of them spent years thinking something was wrong with them. Some of them still do. What's actually happening, what the biology underneath this experience looks like, is one of the stranger things I've come across in a long time, because it's not a neurological disorder. It's not psychosomatic. It's a protein variant, a specific, documented mutation in a mechanoreceptor gene that appears to be doing something in a handful of humans that until recently we only knew how to describe in sharks. So let's start with the shark, because you have to start with the shark. A great white navigating open water in total darkness is not flying blind. It has a sensory system called the ampullae of Lorenzini. Small, gel-filled pores distributed across the shark's snout and face, connected to electroreceptor cells underneath. These cells detect voltage gradients in the surrounding water, not sound, not light, electric fields. The bioelectric fields generated by the muscle contractions and nerve activity of prey animals. A shark can detect a potential difference of 5 nanovolts per centimeter. A sensitivity so extreme, it can locate a flatfish buried under sand by the electrical noise of its heartbeat. That's not metaphor, that's the actual mechanism. The shark is reading the electromagnetic signature of a living body through a layer of sediment. Now, humans don't have ampullae of Lorenzini. What we have instead is a mechanoreceptor system built around proteins that respond to mechanical force, pressure, stretch, vibration. PIEZ2 is one of the most important of these, a large, complex ion channel protein embedded in sensory nerve endings throughout the skin, responsible for a significant portion of our tactile sensitivity. PIEZ2 mutations that knock out function produce people with dramatically impaired touch sensitivity and body position sense. But that's not the variant we're talking about. There's a gain of function mutation in PIEZ2, meaning instead of reducing sensitivity, it amplifies it. And the specific amplification pattern documented in a small number of individuals doesn't just make touch sensitivity higher in the conventional sense. It appears to lower the activation threshold of these ion channels to a point where they respond to something that normal PIEZ2 channels don't register at all. The directional flow of charged particles through a conducting medium, like the air around an electrical cable carrying alternating current, or the electromagnetic field generated by a running motor, or the 50 to 60 hertz hum of household wiring pulsing through the walls of every room you've ever sat in. In standard human skin, these fields don't produce a sensory signal. The channel threshold is too high. The signal exists, the biology just doesn't pick it up. In these individuals, it does. The experience they report, and there are now enough documented cases across multiple research groups to see consistent patterns, is not the dramatic science fiction version. Nobody is seeing electric fields as glowing halos. It's subtler, and in some ways, more unsettling than that. A directional pressure sensation near high current sources, an intensifying tingle that tracks with proximity to running appliances. The ability, which several individuals have described in clinical interviews, to locate live wiring behind walls without any instruments by following the sensation to its source. One documented case involved a woman who could reliably indicate the path of wiring in a room by running her hand along the wall at a distance of several inches, in controlled conditions where she had no prior knowledge of the wiring layout, and the room was designed to rule out auditory and thermal cues. Her accuracy was significantly above chance,
That's a quiet result, published without fanfare, but it sits there in the literature, and it's hard to look away from it. The cellular mechanism, as researchers currently understand it, involves the modified piezo2 channels, acting as biological antennas, picking up the oscillating ion displacement that radiates from alternating current sources. Normal mechanoreceptors require direct membrane deformation to activate. The mutant channel's lower threshold means the electrochemical gradient shift from a nearby electromagnetic field is sufficient to cause ion flux across the membrane. The sensory nerve fires. The signal reaches the brain. The brain, receiving a signal from a pathway it wasn't expecting to carry this kind of data, processes it as what it knows how to process from that pathway: tactile sensation, which is why people describe it as pressure or tingling rather than as something obviously electrical. The sensory cortex is interpreting unfamiliar input through familiar categories. This is, by the way, how all sensory processing works. The brain doesn't experience the world directly. It experiences the translated, categorized output of its own sensory pathways. Actually, there's a fascinating parallel here to sensory substitution devices. BrainPort is a technology that converts visual information into electrical stimulation patterns delivered to the tongue. Blind users, after a period of training, report genuine spatial perception, not as a tongue sensation, but as a kind of seeing. The brain reassigns sensory data to the most contextually appropriate category. The piezo2 variant cases may be doing something analogous. The population frequency of this specific gain-of-function variant is not well established. It's rare, but rare might mean 1 in several thousand rather than 1 in several million, which, across a global population, means potentially hundreds of thousands of people carrying this variant to some degree, most of them undiagnosed, many of them having developed their own private explanations for what they're experiencing: sensitivity to weather, electromagnetic hypersensitivity, anxiety, unusual spatial awareness. The condition has been misread as a number of things. Electromagnetic hypersensitivity, EHS, carries a complicated medical history. The mainstream consensus for many years was that self-reported EHS was not physiologically real. Double-blind studies failed to show that EHS sufferers could detect electromagnetic fields at above-chance rates when they didn't know whether the fields were present or absent. The conclusion drawn: the reported sensitivity was a nocebo effect, the physical sensation triggered by belief, not by exposure itself. That conclusion may have been prematurely applied across the board, because those studies were testing an undifferentiated population of self-identified EHS sufferers, which almost certainly included a mix of individuals with varying underlying mechanisms. What they weren't testing, because the piezo2 gain-of-function research didn't exist yet in the same form, was a genetically screened subset with documented ion channel mutations. The distinction matters enormously. A heterogeneous sample produces a null result that gets applied as a blanket conclusion, but null average results from mixed populations don't tell you what's happening in the subset with a specific biological mechanism. The more targeted research, still developing, not settled science, tells a different story for that subset. Living with functional electroreception in the modern world is, by all accounts, an uncomfortable thing. The human electromagnetic environment has changed more in the last 100 years than it did in the previous 100,000. We are saturated with alternating current fields in every way that has no evolutionary precedent. Power lines, smart grids, the dense wireless infrastructure of urban environments, appliances in every room, devices on our bodies. For someone whose skin is reading that environment, cities are loud in a way that has nothing to do with sound. People with this variant who live in urban areas report a qualitatively different sensory experience than those in rural areas, a kind of electromagnetic sensory overload described in clinical literature as analogous to tinnitus, persistent, resistant to habituation. The signal doesn't fade into background noise, it stays present, demanding. Some individuals develop accommodation strategies, specific shielding materials, deliberate distance from high current sources, preference for older homes with less dense electrical infrastructure. Some have moved. The evolutionary read on this is genuinely unclear. The instinct is to call it a superpower. I understand why, but in the context of the environment these individuals are actually living in, the variant is arguably maladaptive. Their ancestors, carrying this mutation in a world without electrical infrastructure, might have experienced nothing more than mild sensitivity to atmospheric electrical conditions. In a world blanketed with 50 Hz fields and dense wireless signals, the same biology becomes a source of chronic sensory stress. Evolution didn't anticipate the grid. The CRISPR angle is where this gets philosophically interesting. The piezo2 gain-of-function mutation is, from an engineering perspective, a proof of concept for human electroreception. The channel works, the signal pathway exists, the brain can process the input. What the mutation demonstrates, the barrier between humans and electrical field detection is not architectural. We have the basic sensory machinery. It's a matter of threshold tuning. Research groups working on human sensory augmentation, a real, active field, not science fiction, have begun looking at piezo2 channel modulation as a potential route to intentional electroreception capability. The applications are not trivial. Search and rescue personnel who could navigate darkness and debris by detecting the electrical signatures of electrical systems, and potentially the bioelectric fields of survivors. Surgical teams with tactile feedback that extends beyond conventional touch. Navigation systems that don't require screens or external devices. The ethical questions that opens are uncomfortable in ways that take a while to fully unfold. If you can tune a sensory channel to expand human perception, who has access to that modification? Whether it can be done without the persistent overstimulation problem that current natural variants experience. Whether the sensory cortex plasticity required to meaningfully integrate a new signal stream is actually achievable in adult humans at a clinically useful level. Nobody has clean answers yet. The documented cases do, at minimum, force a specific reframe of what human sensory capacity actually is. The standard model, 5 senses clearly defined, fixed by evolutionary history, has been getting quietly complicated for a while. Magnetoreception evidence in humans, infrared sensitivity at the edge of the visual range, echolocation capability in blind individuals that in skilled practitioners approaches the spatial resolution of sonar, and now this, the skin as an electromagnetic receiver, not in every human, not reliably, but in some people because of a single protein variant, consistently, documentably, with enough specificity to pass controlled testing. The boundaries of what human biology can do are apparently not where we drew them. The person who feels your phone before you hand it to them isn't broken, they're just tuned differently. And the environment we built, the one humming with electrical current in every wall of every building on every street of every city, wasn't designed with their biology in mind.